today's event. And we would also like to thank our partners in realizing today's event, who are the Malay Mail and Ideas. Thank you. So just to brief everyone about the flow of the event today, at the end, we will be having a press conference in the Augusta room next door with Dato' Ambiga, and in the foyer outside, we'll be having our alumni and non-members networking session. So you're all welcome for that as well. So without further ado, I think we can begin with having our president of Imperial College Alumni Association Malaysia, Dato' Siu. He's very famous in the alumni and among everyone here. I don't think I need to elaborate further about who this person is. So please welcome Dato' Siu.
Dato' Teo, thank you very much for allowing us to use your venue today. Thank you everybody for coming to join us for the third of Imperial College State of the Nation Dialogues. And I must thank Dato' Ambiga. She's been very busy, as you know, running all kinds of things that many people have attended. And she was we're very grateful to her when she did the Malay Mail debate with Kari about 6 months ago, which was a great success. I think today's agenda really is for Dato' Ambiga to tell you her feelings about the state of this nation that we love very much, Malaysia. Thank you. Dato' Ambiga, please.
Thank you very much, Dato' Siu. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming out on a Saturday afternoon. I do know how difficult it can be. Thank you to the Imperial College. I think I've owed you this one, Christopher, for some time. He's been trying to get me for a while. It just so happens that it's probably the best time, actually, as it turns out, because, as you know, elections are around the corner. My topic for today is confronting the past, building the future. Now, I remember vividly, I don't know how many of you can, or you may not even have been born then, the judicial crisis of 1988 and the sense of gloom that descended upon the administration of justice then. It was an assault on the administration of justice, no more, no less. 20 years later, Tun Abdullah Badawi issued a statement of regret and awarded a compensation to the judges who had been the victims of the judicial crisis. For those who do not recall the judicial crisis, that was when 3 Supreme Court judges and the former Lord President, Tun Saleh, were unceremoniously removed from their positions in court by what we consider, or what the lawyers consider, a flawed tribunal, basically because their decisions didn't appear to accord with the government of the day. So 20 years later, Tun Abdullah Badawi issued a statement of regret. We had a dinner. I remember it was organized with members of the bar. And the Malaysian bar on its own, and this was 20 years after the event, so 2008. 20 years after the event, there was some kind of reckoning that with the past, in a sense, and there was a gesture by the government to say, look, we're sorry this happened. Alongside that, the Malaysian bar was responsible for setting up a panel of eminent persons to look into the judicial crisis, and they issued their report in 2008, vindicating the judges. Many people questioned whether such a gesture was necessary 20 years later. Was this necessary? Was it important? And I will argue later, and I will in my conclusion, that it does make a difference. It is important for us to look at our past, to correct as much of it as we can before we can look to a bright future. And I will take that argument, as I say, at the end of my talk today. Now, our institutions. Justice Vigneswaran of Sri Lanka said this of the independence of the judiciary. He said, "The independence of the judiciary has two facets, extrinsic and intrinsic, or the outside and the inside. The extrinsic component is made up of the structural, systemic, and environmental factors that form the setup within the judge's function. The extrinsic component, therefore, includes constitutional procedures for the appointment of judges, security of tenure, salaries and perks, their personal security, including threats and inducements. The intrinsic component includes how judges think, react, and behave. This component is what is truly within our power. However, even the most altruistic would agree that the extrinsic component greatly shapes the intrinsic. In common parlance, I suppose you could call it the hardware and the software. The outside is the hardware, the intrinsic is the software. You need them both to work harmoniously to achieve results. And I believe, although this statement was made in relation to the judiciary, that this formula works for all our institutions. The hardware alone is not enough. The software has to be there as well. And I will give you one example of how the hardware dovetailed with the software to produce a positive result. You may be surprised with my example, but I'm going to take the rally on 112, the rally that was recently held on the 12th of January. Now, the hardware would be the Peaceful Assembly Act. Don't get me wrong, there are good things about the Act, there are a few things I disagree, but let's not talk about what I disagree with. Let's talk about the Peaceful Assembly Act. It is a permissive legislation. It actually allows public assemblies, and that is a first. So that act was in force. But more important than the act, in my view, was the software, which was the mindset of the police. That's what made the difference, in my view. You can have all the acts in the world, but if people who enforce it are not committed to the spirit of the legislation, there's little you can achieve. So there you had an excellent rally, no problems, and it was peaceful. Of course, people say, Bursay didn't take the stadium, that's why it was troublesome, etc., etc., etc. And and many people said it's the act that made the difference. I disagree. It's not just the act. When Bursay 3 took place, the Public Assembly Act was in force. It didn't make a difference because the mindset of the police was completely different. What we saw, or what we were confronted with, was FRU, water cannons, everything, tear gas, you name it. That's what we were confronted with. But when you treat people with trust, then they respond likewise. And that's what 112 proved. So that's my argument about hardware and software. You need both for a winning formula. Now, enough has been said in the past about the arms of government and the necessity for a separation of powers. I'm not going to go into those issues. I would like to break it down a little bit more and talk about issues that relate to our society and our relationships with one another. Datuk Saifuddin, whose article was carried in the Malay Mail, put it very aptly, and in that article, which was entitled, "In Dire Need of a New Conversation." What Datuk Saifuddin said was that we needed to change our strategies for the future. We needed to talk about different things. We need to raise the level of our conversation. That's what he said. That what is needed effectively was a change in our thought process. But in my view, before we can change our thought process, we have to understand how it has been shaped in the last 50 years or so in this country. What examples have we set for our children? How has our education system shaped our young minds? How has the media influenced our thought process? How has the legal system, for example, influenced us? As a lawyer, let me start with the laws. We have, and we continue to have, oppressive laws, which unfortunately are laws that we have inherited from many, many years ago. Many of them are actually outdated and should be repealed. Some have been. I have to say that. For example, the ISA has been repealed. It's replaced with another law. There are problems with that, but nevertheless, the ISA has been repealed. The emergency declarations have been revoked. And we have the Public Assembly Act. But there are many, many other laws that really have to be done away with. We have laws relating to sedition. We have laws relating to the Printing, Presses and Publications Act, which are all archaic, because all those laws do is control or stifle freedom of speech. And in this day and age, with the internet world, it really has no place. There is no place for those sorts of controls. But unfortunately, they remain there. And why do I say laws are important and legislation is important? Because it can shape mindsets. That's what happened with the Public Assembly Act. It took the police a while, but eventually their mindset did change. And the Public Assembly Act did have something to do with that. Now, what about our education system? How well has it fared in shaping our young minds? Now, you all have seen the UUM video. You all know which video I'm talking about. But that was one of the most frightening things I've seen in a long time, let me tell you. I think it beats many of our, horror movies, to be honest. And what was horrifying for me was a few things, actually. First of all, if you notice, there was an oath that had to be taken at the beginning of the session by the students, who all dutifully stood up and took that oath. An oath not to participate in rallies and so on and so forth. So after they take that oath, this young lady then stands up and says her piece, quite accurately, by the way, setting forth the law, and whereupon the moderator set upon her in a very rude and unbecoming manner. Now, a few things there, actually, which I found sad. Apart from the fact that the moderator's behavior was appalling, what concerned me was the reaction of the students. What have we done to them, for goodness sakes? What have we done to our students that they were okay with taking the oath of such a nature, where restricting their freedom, restricting their constitutional rights? That's what that oath was about. I agree to restrict my constitutional rights. They were prepared to take that oath. And more importantly is, when no one really stood up to defend that girl who was under attack. I'm not blaming the students at all, but it is a symptom of what's happening in our education system. Now, the education system, you can have a 2-day seminar on the education system and what should be done with our education system. But there is a lot wrong with it. We have history being rewritten because it suits certain parties as to how it should read. We have the BTN, the Biro Tata Negara courses. And there again, there's some extremely horrifying stories. Let me just tell you, and I think this has come out recently in December 2012, a person who had attended one of these sessions, and he reminds us, don't forget that this person called Hamim Hussein, a deputy director of the Federal Territory Office of the BTN, called the Chinese sea serpent. You remember that slanted eye? But of course, he was immediately, there was a huge outcry by all. And then there was someone else who was Nasir Safa, special assistant to the Prime Minister, forced to resign after expressing his contempt, using the word pendatang and so on, contempt for the non-Malay pendatang or immigrants. But action was taken. And that is good. That is a good sign. But the worrying thing is that people actually think they can say these things. And the other worrying thing is many people actually get away with it. Now, of course, the BTN apparently has improved, but still there are problems. But this person talks about Bersih. There's a lot about Bersih in some of these BTN courses. Bersih is kotor, Bersih is bad, Bersih is etc., etc. Bersih seems to have really caught the imagination of both. People who love it, you either love it or you hate it, okay? And then this person talks about a video, he says, which was aimed at traumatizing participants so that we would feel that the Muslims and the Malays are victims and therefore Malays must unite against the larger world. What they did was they showed violence depicting Iraqi, Palestinian children and women buried alive, bleeding from facial, all this in the BTN. Then another video was played showing religious violence amongst Muslims and Christian Malays in Ambon, including a scene of an attacker hacking a defenseless man with a machete. And then it goes on with a few of these things, and then it shows Bersih. The Bersih people who threw the stones, who threw demonstrators who hurled tear gas, blah, blah, blah. So do you see what's happening there? It's shocking. There's more. There's more, and it's very worrying. There's also an assault on the opposition. They have videos shown which seem to suggest conspiracy between the opposition and the Jews and so on and so forth. So these are things that are going on without you and I knowing about it. And it's only when people came out and started divulging what happens in these sessions that we know. But the positive sign is people are beginning to get disgusted with these lessons, so-called, that they are getting. But again, why do I talk about this? I talk about this because if you need to understand the mindset as to why certain people think that it's okay to be racist, let me tell you, it comes from this. It comes from our system that trains them in that way. So we have a whole generation of people, a group who actually think in this way. And that has to be unraveled. That has to be unraveled. Then you have, so that is the brainwashing that goes on. Then of course the media. And let me tell you straight away, I only buy the Malay Mail. This is the truth. Unfortunately, on Saturday and Sunday, I'm forced to buy the Star because you don't have a paper on Saturday and Sunday. You'll have to change that, that to you. Because I at least get it doesn't make me angry, let me put it that way, to start with. There's a balance, and I enjoy reading it. The New Straits Times, someone said to me, actually, the best way to deal with the New Straits Times is to read it from the back. Because then you start with obituaries and so on, and say, you don't have to go past the middle, you know? You don't have to go past the middle of the paper. So that's it's a pity because we have good journalists who have been put in a position where they have to report news in a skewed manner. So the media also plays a big part. I know that TV3 consistently shows videos about Bersih being kotor. There is actually a video. Have you seen it? Because I haven't seen it, but I'm told it comes on periodically. So this campaign against Bersih carries on. And I know how they misrepresent. And honestly, you have to be on the receiving end of that to appreciate how awful it is that people can actually twist the facts. Now, what about censorship? Censorship is another thing that happens, which also has been shaping our minds. What you can read and what you can't read. You have, for example, the film, the May 13th film. There's a big hue and cry, but it's likely that it will be shown. Now, how is it that's allowed, but other films, similar films, are not allowed? They are censored. Now, part of the brainwashing can also be seen in the case of Azrul. I don't know whether you've been reading about Azrul and Bank Islam. Azrul, who has been suspended just for having a point of view that perhaps the establishment may not be happy with. What did Bank Islam do? They suspended him. So again, that comes from the examples of our leaders. What are our leaders teaching us? What is it in the last 20, 25, 30 years that our leaders have said and done, the manner in which they have behaved? How has that shaped the way we think? And I think it has shaped the way we think in a big way. And that's why I've always said, we need statesmen. We need leaders and politicians who sound like statesmen, who are statesmen. We are a bit sick of politicians, don't you agree? Especially during this time when elections are around the corner. We want people to make sense. We actually want to know what all the parties who are running for elections, what is it you're going to do for the country? What is your plan for the future? That's what we want to know as citizens. Now, the issue about laws, again, going back to laws again, another thing that shapes the way we think is the manner in which those laws are enforced. You will see that they are not necessarily enforced evenly. There is selective prosecution, I call it selective persecution in some instances. For example, you can see it in political violence that's taking place versus the girl who stepped on the Prime Minister's photograph, if you remember that. Look at the treatment both get. When it's political violence against the opposition in particular, nothing is done. This girl steps on the Prime Minister's photograph. What do? They handcuff her. Horrifying. Then you have corruption involving those in power. Nothing is done. Then you have Teo Beng Hock, who dies for $3,000. Another example of the manner in which laws are enforced. Look at the way Swaram is treated. Look at deaths in custody generally. What is being done about it? In any other civilized country, if there is a death in custody, investigation is immediate. You won't, and those who are involved will be suspended so that investigations can be carried out effectively. Recently, and in fact the things I'm talking about, Azrul, the UUM video, death in custody, everything took place in the last 1 week. All these things took place in the last 1 week and has been happening for a long time. So when we take a blasé attitude to deaths in custody, what is it our children are learning? What is it we're saying to them? Are we saying that it's not so serious when it's a death in custody? What about that poor child, Aminul Rashid, who was shot by the police? And what did the police do? They come out and say, he is a criminal. Can you imagine how the parents must feel? As a parent, I can tell you it's obviously shattering enough that you kill the boy, but you then turn around and try and justify it by calling him the criminal. Who's the criminal? So, and these events are reported in the press. These statements, these broad brush statements by those in authority come out in the press. Our children are reading that. We are reading that. So that's another mindset that's being created. That in fact, it's okay for the police to behave in the manner that they did. And then you have, of course, Parliament. Our parliamentarians should be setting examples, but do they? You have racist comments. You have sexist comments. In fact, I think women's groups should really go on a rampage and go on a campaign against MPs who are sexist. Don't vote them in, for goodness sake. We don't need them. We don't want racist MPs either. So these things that keep happening affect our conversation. So if we are going to change our conversation, then we have to dismantle all these systems that allow us to operate in the manner that we have so far. Now, these negative influences must be removed. Today, the world is smaller. We have a brain drain, actually. Our best and the brightest are leaving and going elsewhere because of opportunities. Enough surveys have been done. I think you've read them. Not only are the opportunities better, they're not very happy with the way things are going. They don't like the divisiveness. They don't find that the opportunities are there for them. So they will walk. It may not have happened 10, 15 years ago, but the world is small. You have to give them a reason to stay. Otherwise, we are going to continue losing our best and the brightest. Look at the illicit money outflow. Malaysia is, according to GFI, the second highest illicit money outflow. What are we doing about that? Why is that happening? We're talking about billions, and have you noticed we've stopped talking about millions? It's now billions or trillions. I don't know how many zeros that is, but it doesn't seem to matter how many millions and billions and trillions we're talking about. There's no accountability for what is happening. What's Bank Negara doing, for goodness sake? How are they going to track down and explain to us why there is such a big illicit money outflow? Now, to me, the biggest scourge, and you can change anything, you can change the laws, you can make them more liberal, but unless this one problem is solved, nothing will really, really change, and that's corruption. Because when you improve laws and you change things that are on the surface without strengthening the core, nothing will last. And the core at the moment is rotten because of corruption. We need to be dead serious about how we tackle corruption. There are those who can openly come out in the press and say, yeah, what's wrong? You know, what's wrong with this amount of money? What's wrong with finding cash, carrying cash into the country of, again, millions or, I can't even remember. But what do you mean what's wrong? If you hold positions of power, you better understand what conflict of interest is. Have you noticed not many of them really understand conflict of interest? They think they can draw lines between friends and family and so on and so forth and say, I didn't know, or whatever it is. How can that be? How do they get away with it? So this is people at the top. They are the ones who are legislating. They are the ones who are policy makers. If they don't see anything wrong, how are we going to get out of this rut of corruption? I don't know if you know, but during Tun Badawi's time, in 2008, in fact, we signed up to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and we ratified it in 2008. There are many wonderful provisions there to help a country set up its mechanism to fight corruption. It talks about asset recovery. And it basically what it does is it helps nations who sign up to this treaty can help each other so that people can't escape out of the country carrying their loot, never to be seen again. So that's the hardware. The hardware is there, let me tell you, on corruption. But the software isn't. And part of that software is political will. In my view, there is no political will to fight corruption to the hilt. Now, the list I've given you is obviously not exhaustive. So what is the landscape today in Malaysia? Why is it, I'm saying, that no government, and I'm talking about whoever it is who wins, no government can leave things as they are now. It's not possible. It will not work anymore. And that is because citizens have become more empowered. It's not only true of Malaysia, it's true all over the world. But in Malaysia, I will say, citizens are more empowered because of 4 things. First, the information age. There is no longer a monopoly over information. The government cannot control what information comes to you. People are more empowered because they know more. And it is their right to know more. And I've always said that the divine actually has put into the hands of man the most powerful weapon, more powerful than nuclear weapons, and that is the power of knowledge and information. Because that is what is making a difference the world over. So that's one, the information age. Second, why are citizens more in the know about what's happening? Because we have a strong opposition. Don't cringe when I say opposition, some of you, but because there are people who cringe. But if you believe in a multi-party democracy, you need a strong government and a strong opposition. It doesn't help us to have a weak opposition. It is because we have a strong opposition that many instances, many scandals have been revealed, for example. People are kept accountable. Even in the opposition states, where Barisan is I won't say opposition states, where Pakatan is the government, the Barisan opposition also acts as a check and balance. This whole system of check and balance works when you have a strong opposition, when you have true multi-party democracy. And I long to see the day, and this is the Bersih vision, where we do have effective multi-party democracy, where both respect each other's roles, and where they cross the parliamentary floor. Maybe 5 years you have it, 5 years I'll have it. You know why? That's best for us. That is what is best for us, because it keeps them on their toes, both. It keeps both parties on their toes. And who is the beneficiary of that? The Rakyat. And that's why when they say Bersih is pro-opposition, is pro-this, is anti-government, we want a multi-party democracy because we want power to return where it belongs, to the people. And that's why we need clean and fair elections, because we want to be able to choose the government who should govern us. And if we make a mistake, we should be able to remove them too. It's as simple as that. The third thing, the third reason I say people are more empowered is because of the rise of civil society in Malaysia. I think you will all agree with me that Bersih is not the first civil society movement. We've had many. And there are many dedicated individuals. Let me tell you, I know how much they get paid. It's pittance. Who do it purely and simply, and they lead simple lives, purely and simply to improve the lot of their fellow human being, because they believe in a cause. For example, the anti-ISA cause. They've been fighting it for years and years and years before Bersih or many of the other organizations came up. So civil society has built up slowly, surely, but has built up very well. And what that has done is it has empowered the citizens, and it has become a means by which citizens can express themselves. So that's the third thing that has changed the landscape in Malaysia. The fourth would be the growth of the online media. I think there's no doubt that the media, and that's why I say the media is so critical in every aspect of our life. Because there's an online media, of course it's part of the bigger picture of internet exchange of information. But journalists do more than that. Journalists can shape opinions. And that's why journalists are so important. So those are the four reasons I say why Malaysia's landscape has changed. and why really things have to change. They cannot stay static. Now I come to my favorite subject. I have to do this, a plug for elections. Now, as you know, we are at a critical juncture in our nation's history as we head towards what I believe to be the most contentious general elections yet in Malaysia. But is that a bad thing? I say no. In fact, I would say it is a good thing. I'm actually looking forward to it. I think it's going to be enjoyable, provided certain things, we make sure there's no violence and political violence and so on. But it is a reflection of democracy in action. Now, gone are the days when elections are a foregone conclusion. That's been the case for the longest time, as you know. But even though people knew what the result was going to be, the turnout is pretty good in Malaysia, let me tell you. It's anything between 70 to 78%, which is pretty good. And that was the case in the 2008 elections. But in any real contest, for example, in a football match, the referee must not only be fair, but he must be competent. Do you recall last Saturday's football matches? I mean, I'm sure everybody was watching it. I was instructed to watch it. How many times did people swear at the referee, for example, because they thought his decision was unfair? What about the football field? Was it an even pitch? Did the players who flaunted the rules get a yellow card or get sent off? Well, the same principles apply in an election. That's all Bersih has been fighting for, and will continue to fight for. We demand, and yes, we are entitled to demand, that our electoral roll must be cleaned up. In April last year, the EC chief declared that our electoral roll is the cleanest in the world. Do you remember that? Then we produced case after case, not only Bersih, members of the public, many people, case after case of discrepancies and potential fraud pointed out to the EC. By the fourth quarter of last year, the tune changed. They said, well, we are human and so on and so forth. And then interestingly, they set up a unit in November last year, a special unit to look into the electoral roll. We immediately said, look, you're setting up a unit, let civil society be present, we will help you. And let representatives from the political parties also be present, we will help you. But all that fell on deaf ears. We don't actually know what this special unit is doing. And we are continuing to find discrepancies. We are doing our own research. It's not easy. We continue to find discrepancies. Of course, I don't have to go any further. Have you been following what's happening in the RCI in Sabah? How can you say you have the cleanest electoral roll in the world knowing what happened in Sabah? Now, to me, really, by all accounts, it shows that a Project IC did exist in Sabah. And of course, it reveals much more. You know the evidence. I don't want to comment on it too much because it's not proper till all the evidence is in. But let me say this, I'm not surprised. I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised, if you know what I mean. Because that's exactly what we've been hearing. And people forget that in the Likas case, do you remember the Likas case in the year 2000 in Sabah? Justice Muhammad Kamil J. actually found that the electoral roll was not clean, and he set aside the elections. And he found it not clean because of the same complaints of foreigners being on electoral rolls, people who are not qualified to be on the electoral roll being on the electoral roll. Do you know what happened after that? A new section was introduced into the Elections Act, Section 9A, which said the courts can no longer scrutinize the electoral roll. A number of people don't know this. So now the courts can't look at the electoral roll. So these things were happening to actually ensure that no one knew what happened in Sabah. The Sabah RCI, and credit to the government for setting it up, no doubt about that, is confronting our past. And it may be 30 years, 20 years ago, but can you see how important it is? Can you see how vital it is that we understand what happened? The demographics of Sabah has changed. I don't know why people were denying it in the past, because if you just go there, you can see it. Sabahans will tell you. And a statistician, as I understand it, gave evidence it's nearly 28% of the population of Sabah has changed. And of course, the reasons have to be gone into by the RCI. My only regret is that this RCI will not complete its work before the next general elections. Because to me, we really ought to clean up that role before we go to the general elections. And let me tell you this as well. We are getting similar complaints in Peninsular Malaysia. Bloating of electoral roll. It can happen because there are many young voters. Not all of it is fraud. But we have had reports of foreigners being allowed to get onto the rolls, although they're not entitled to. And this is where we hold EC to account. EC has to account to us. They are the guardians of the roll, this roll that now even the courts cannot scrutinize or set aside. Of course, they have periods of objection in rolls when they come up, but it's just not enough. So there are many other areas that need cleaning up. I think you know what they are. I'm not going into it. But I will say that, again, the media is critical in the next general elections. And you have to choose. The media has to choose. You have to decide. Are you on the side of the rakyat, or are you going to give partisan views? What are you going to do? This is your election too. You are a voter too. Are you going to stand up and be counted with us, or with whom? All I ask is, be fair. Give everyone access. And I do know, and I appreciate, that the journalists don't make the ultimate decision. I do appreciate that. You do have such things happening everywhere in the world. Whoever the owners make the judgment calls. But the difference is that mainstream media in other countries have a variety of views. They have views that side one party, but they also have views siding the other, all of which are available to everyone. That's the difference. Now, the Minister of Information has relented somewhat and said, okay, I will allow the manifestos of the parties to be publicized on television in a pre-recorded message. And that is what he considers free and fair access to the media. Do you? I don't. I don't need to hear it on TV. I think we know what their manifestos are. That's all they are prepared to give. Why? If you're so confident of yourself, there's no need to behave like that. Now, what I will also make this appeal, the appeal that I make to journalists, to the press actually, to stand up this time round and be counted, because these elections are very important for the future of this nation. I ask you to stand up and be counted and to do the right thing. I say that too to the Election Commission, commissioners. There are other commissioners who sit there. I appeal to them as well. Please do the right thing by the Rakyat this time. They know what we are saying. They know that some of the issues that we have raised have merit. They know it. They know what is happening. People have to do the right thing in this next general election, because it is so important for the future of the nation. Now let me go to the future. As you know, during the time of Tun Abdullah Badawi, I said there was this 88 crisis where there was an apology. He also set up the Police Commission, if you remember, Royal Commission on the Police, which was excellent. There's a superb report that they've issued. Unfortunately, they couldn't act on the most important recommendation there, the setting up of the IPCMC. And that is why till today you have so many deaths in custody, apart from other abuses. Then Tun Abdullah Badawi also set up the Judicial Appointments Commission, which has gone some way towards making sure that appointments to the judiciary are not arbitrary. Now, as you know, the present Prime Minister has introduced the PAA. I disagree with parts of it, particularly the part which says you cannot have street protests, but that's an argument for another day, because street protests are as much your right as any other gathering. That's the whole point of freedom of assembly, is to make yourself visible to the powers that be. Now, the Prime Minister also set up the PSC, the Parliamentary Select Committee for Electoral Reform. Another first. Very impressive. But unfortunately, the EC is not complying with much of what the PSC has recommended. One or two things, yes, here and there, things that are not critical. So again, we set up these commissions, but it never goes to its logical conclusion, implementation. So that's where we are lacking. Now, how do we then build the future? And I must say this is a Mandela quote. Poverty, like apartheid, is not an accident. Like slavery, it is man-made and can be removed by the actions of human beings. Likewise, I will say, all of these acts that we have to confront from the past are not acts of God. They are acts of man, they are our acts. And they can be easily changed and resolved with the right leadership. So what is it we want from the next government? I consider the next government, whoever it is, whether it is Barisan or Pakatan, a government in transition, because the nation is in transition. They cannot do things, it cannot be business as usual. And these are the things I would suggest. Number one, that we firmly re-establish the rule of law, we strengthen legal processes, get the best lawyers in town to draw this up. It has been done before, it has been done in other countries, to review all our laws. Number two, attack corruption with a vengeance. In fact, to me, the government of the day should already be doing it. But this is our message for the next government, whoever it is. Attack corruption. Look at asset recovery. Those who have run away with the money, get it back. Look at amnesty. It's happened in Hong Kong. It'll help in the battle of corruption. Make sense of the corruption, anti-corruption treaty. Dismantle the burdens of dishonest contracts. There are many contracts which have been entered into. Those have to be looked at. I would also suggest a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, much like the South African one. And this is where, do you remember I argued about the 1988 apology, so-called, that was given to the judges? That, in effect, was a Truth and Reconciliation move. That's what Truth and Reconciliation is about. It's about looking at all the injustices of the past, the breaches of human rights, but not necessarily prosecuting anybody for it, but gathering them before a Truth and Reconciliation Commission and allowing people to talk about it and to confront whoever it is they're accusing. It is a cathartic process. It is therapeutic. It is good for the nation. It's good for the conscience of the nation. May 13th is one of those that should be brought before a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So I would suggest the next government has to look at that. They have to look at deaths in custody. They have to look at human rights abuses. They have to look at crime rates. That's the next thing. I just saw a tweet from Gobind Singh Dio, who says his aunt was attacked, just, by the way, this morning or yesterday evening, in Section 12, outside her house. So crime rates is something that affects all of us. we must set up the IPCMC. I am a strong believer of limited terms of those in power. For the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, there must be limited terms. That is something I think they should look at. The system of elections must be overhauled. It's happening everywhere. It must be overhauled. Then, of course, you need economic reform. I won't go into that, to stop illegal capital flight and many other issues. The education system, I think politicians should stop deciding education policy. It should be educationists. It should be professionals who are looking at the issue of education of our children. We have to make an effort to stop racism, sexism. We have to look at women's issues more holistically, minority rights, migrant workers, the environment, and don't underestimate the environmental issues. What's happening in Rao is unforgivable. Linus is another problem. And they can potentially be serious environmental issues there. In conclusion, Martin Luther King said he has a dream. We don't have to dream anymore. We can actually see this bright future. As far as I'm concerned, our bright future is within our grasp. It can be done, in other words. It can be done. And I don't think we even need to wait till 2020. It can be done in 2013. At least it can start being done in 2013. And I think that we should grasp the opportunity. We should all grasp the opportunity. We should know that it is possible, that it can be done. And we have to make sure that our leaders get it done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Co-chairperson of Bersih 2.0, Dato' Ambiga. Another round of applause.
Thank you.
Dato', if I can have you remain on stage
Sure.
for the
Yeah.
Q&A session. So I do have 1 minute to maybe just emphasize what an important day it is for us to have Dato' Ambiga with us today. She has gone through a big journey in becoming who she is today. I think it's important that we take note that she is also a member of the Executive Committee of the Human Rights Organization, HAKAM. And she has been recognized widely outside of Malaysia as well. She is the recipient of the United States Secretary of State's International Women of Courage Award for the year 2009. And on the 21st of July 2011, she was awarded an honorary doctorate of laws from the University of Exeter for her work in advancing human rights. And her latest award on the 23rd of September in 2011, she was awarded the Chevalier of the French Order of the Légion d'honneur, also for her work in human rights. So I think, ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
it is important that for the future we do recognize all these important people in politics. And moving forward, let's have questions that do make sense, as Dr. Ambiga has been emphasizing that is what we should do today. So can I have the first question on the floor, please? Yes, sir.
Hi, Philip Karpia from the Malay Mail. First and foremost, thank you so much for the kind remarks about the paper.
And thank you for
Oh yeah, we are trying very hard. You spoke, and thank you so much for your remarks. You spoke about Malaysian citizens getting the rights enshrined in the Constitution. The powers that be and politicians have always harped over the years and differentiated Malaysia from the other homogeneous societies globally. And they talk about Malaysia as a tinderbox, a multiracial, multi-religious and multicultural tinderbox. And that there has to be a trade-off between giving absolute rights and maintaining racial harmony. That's the defense that they have over the years been harping on. And I just wanted your views on this insofar as Malaysia is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. By the way, that's also the brainwashing that we have been subjected to year in, year out, you know, the way the May 13 bogeyman was used. And that to me is a brainwashing. But let me tell you, after Bersih 2, this is my personal impression. Bersih 2, actually, this is July last year, took away all those fears. Everyone said, oh, there's going to be racial riots, blah, blah, but in Bersih 2, there was such a unity, because there was unity of purpose, the racial issues didn't arise. In fact, it cut across all racial divides. So, but of course, people still want to keep pushing this point, that we're a tinderbox and so on and so forth. But you know what? Didn't see it in Bersih 3, didn't see it in 112, multiracial gatherings. So I don't buy it anymore. Personally, I don't think it's as easy as perhaps it was in the past to start a racial issue. I know you see arguments in the internet and so on that are raging, but they die down after a while and people forget about it. So maybe we are maturing, you know, as a society. Maybe these things are not really creating the problems that they would have in the past. Because, you know, they use religion as well in the same way. But Malaysians have a good sense now about these things. That's my impression. And they're not so easily swayed by the likes of those that use these issues to spark problems. Yeah. That's my personal view.
Thank you, Dato'. A second question from the floor? Yep.
So, actually, I share a lot of the views that you have. That's why the paper is the way it is. Having said that, you have a lot of wishes. How many years has it taken us to get here? How many years do you think it's going to take us to change all that? It's not going to be easy. It cannot be done overnight. You know that. In calling for change, I think, you know, change doesn't necessarily come overnight. It doesn't necessarily bring success immediately. So I need to ask you, in your opinion now, in light of everything that's happening around us in the world, also within Malaysia, the things that are happening here, how long do you think your dream, and the dream that's achievable, no doubt about it, how long do you think it's going to take before it becomes a reality in your eyes? Because it cannot be, as I say, it can be overnight. It's a lot of things you want to change. And whatever's happened today is not a result of, it's over 30 years. Right?
Yeah. Well, okay. I can only answer from the experience of perhaps some other countries, and I will talk about corruption for a minute, because to me that's number one problem. That has to be resolved. I'll tell you how long it took Hong Kong. It took them 3 years. Okay? So that is really achievable. If we had done this a long time ago, we would actually be in a different place right now. So that is corruption. So as far as the other issues are concerned, obviously some take longer than others. But I think it's important to start the process. So as I say, for me, the biggest problem is corruption. Hong Kong did it in about 3 years. And we should just get going with that first. So I don't know what other time frame to give. Yes, go ahead.
Actually, there was an interview on CNN. And this is the only one question they actually took some time to think about. Most to address the issue of corruption. They didn't say anything else. That was the only answer they gave. And that's a good answer.
It's a good answer. And I think, yeah. But as I say, going by what a country like Hong Kong, that's the only time frame I can think of. But there has to be political will, I think. That's what the answer is of this gentleman who's talking about the president in Philippines. We need to see the political will to get rid of corruption. It's creating a huge hole, you know, if there's any economists in the audience, they can tell us about that. Christopher.
Hi, it's been it's quite a while since I wanted to ask you this question, but I'm so glad to have this opportunity. Brainwashing is really big. I think even one might say that calling a taxi is what do you call this? What we is brainwashing as well, because we all think that we have to ask the taxi first where we want to go first before the taxi will take us. When in fact taxis all around the world is the opposite. They actually serve us instead of we having to credit them. So now my question now is on our students, the youth. Obviously the listen thing is very big right now, and everybody's talking about it. My question is on two things. One is the student leaders that are supposedly participating in this. This may come out as very racist, as racist remark, but one might see that it is the Malay students who tend to do more like booing, and then the Indian and the Chinese students tend to be quiet instead of like supporting. So, I mean, you can see the video, and can you share any insights on why this is happening? Why is it racially, distributed? And the second question is on Bhavani herself, the student who spoke up. Do you see that her role as an activist, as a student, is showing that she's is it a bad thing or a good thing? I mean, that's my concern,
Do you think it's a bad thing or a good thing?
No, I think it's a good thing. But in the whole scene, she may be seen as an extremist, as somebody who's like, everybody is doing fine. Suddenly she's shouting and screaming, and it doesn't seem as though she was calm. But then again, I understand because she was probably very, very angry as well. So, what do you think of these two perspectives?
The exuberance of youth. I mean, what is wrong with that? To me, it was wonderful that she came up there and she spoke her mind. And we have to understand, you're talking about young people here. If they are passionate about something, that's great. That's how it's supposed to be. Who was it who said, George Bernard Shaw, you're at 18, you're a socialist, yeah. So she's doing exactly what you would expect a student to do, to me. Okay, I don't know about the racial divisions. I didn't notice that. I mean, I only went halfway up the video. I really couldn't stomach the rest of it. So I don't actually know what happened in the rest of it. But that was enough. But to me, you see, it is this mindset. Those children are, whatever it is, they're still, for me, still children. But they're afraid. Some of them are on scholarship. Some of them are worried that our coup may be used against them. They may be expelled. Let me tell you about students in the Middle East who took part in Bersih. A couple of them have lost their scholarships. They're medical students there and they've lost their scholarships. The state government has withdrawn their scholarship. This is Terengganu state government. So a lot of them, they hold them to ransom. Our children are being held to ransom. That is actually one of the biggest plus points of free education, okay, in my view, that you don't have the control that you have over our students. So, to me, the whole system has to change. That's what was alarming for me. The fact that many of them probably felt the way Bhavani did, but didn't dare to say anything. That, to me, was the problem there, actually. So, as far as I'm concerned, what Bhavani did is fine. There's no issue at all. And she's an activist and very well capable of taking care of herself. I'd love to see more feisty students like that in our universities. And don't forget that academia also has a role to play. Look at the way Bank Islam treated Azrul, who produced an opinion that they disagreed with. Our academia is also facing those problems, There are a lot of problems in the universities, so there has to be a total overhaul about that, of that. So as far as I'm concerned, I think, as I say, exuberance of youth, feisty youngsters, that's exactly what we need in our system. And I think we're seeing it. Because I notice on Twitter, I'm on Twitter, that Solidarity Mahasiswa, another students group, came out in full support of Bhavani. And they've been having programs, they've had videos. Have you seen some of those videos? They're hilarious, by the way. Absolutely hilarious. Parodies of what took place. And, I told a comedian once, you don't have to write material for Malaysia, okay? You don't have to write anything. You just have to go and perform what happens in real life in Malaysia. It's so funny, right? But, so I think you actually are seeing a rise of student power, a rise of students who are actually interested in what's happening in the country. So it's a very interesting time for students, yeah.
Thank you, Dato'. I think we can entertain one last question.
Yes, Dato'. I'm from Malaysian Reserves, Circulation Department. You were speaking about the freedom of press, Have you picked up the Selangor Times and the Haraka? By chance, have you seen? They do speak up.
Yeah, I do off and on.
Off and on,
but
yeah.
not
And I think the government
consistently.
they have allowed the freedom of press to give the other papers.
No. Yeah, of course. It applies to everybody. But by the way, Haraka and Keadilan is only available to party members. Are you aware of that?
But it is so.
They
so
don't
so.
have a license for general circulation. Huh?
Yeah, but they do
They don't.
sell also.
That doesn't matter. But strictly speaking,
Yep.
they are restricted. The
Yeah, I know
circulation
they're
is restricted.
Thank you.
But look, freedom of the press, access to the press applies to everybody, all right? I'm not, but the problem with the mainstream media is they have the biggest access to everyone in this country, and they are using that advantage. But whatever advantage you may have does not justify lying. That's where I draw the line. Absolute spinning and lying, to me, is a no-no, no matter who you are.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ambiga. Another round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we end today's dialogue session, I would like to invite our partner, Tunku Abidin Muhriz, the Chief Executive of the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs Ideas. So please welcome Tunku Abidin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to thank Dr. Siu for inviting Ideas to be a partner, and also Dr. Ambiga for that wonderful session. Ideas, and we're very proud to be part of the civil society movement that Dr. Ambiga was talking about. And I'm very grateful to you, Dr., for reminding me of the anti-ISA movement chapter in London. I was there when it was formed in one of the rooms at the LSE, not IC, I'm afraid. And I think I was one of the earliest signatories of that movement. So there is a long genealogy of civil society in Malaysia. One of the other things I think that wasn't brought up in the earlier session was the upcoming election observation mission that the EC has invited several organizations to, including Ideas. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dato', but our Idea's stance on this is that it is better to be part of it, even though it might be flawed, even though there might be some aspects of it which don't meet international standards. But we think it's better to be part of it than not be a part of it at all, and that risks less civil society participation. And my colleague Wan Saiful has asked me to tell all of you that the website for this will be coming up, going live on Tuesday, permerhati.my. As I said, and I mentioned this in my column in the Malay Mail last week, I'm now in the Malay Mail. I'm very proud to be in the Malay Mail. My previous newspaper and I had some friction on occasion. So I guess give Dr. Ambiga another round of applause, and that's been great to be here. Thank you. And one more thing, we're very happy to, looking forward to the next session, which is with Tun Mahathir, I believe. So we like to keep things balanced.
Okay. Thank you again, Tun Abidin, from Ideas. Okay, sure.
Very sorry about this, but you're absolutely right about the observers. I have a duty to also mention Citizen Observer Movement that we are starting, Bersih, and we are looking for volunteers for that as well. We are called Pemantau. But I agree with you, however flawed it is, you should be there. No doubt about that.
Thank you again, Dato', and thank you very much to Abidin from Ideas. So before we wrap up the session, it's important that I mention, of course, thank you very much to Abidin for mentioning our next event coming up soon will be the Gala Charity Dinner with Tun Mahathir on the 2nd of March at Grand Hyatt. So we are open to sponsorship. Anybody who wants to give us some cash, please do. That would be great. Thank you very much. And we are also looking for sponsors for the continuation of our State of the Nation dialogues. So this is our third State of the Nation dialogues. And previously we've had Azran Osman Rani, the CEO of AirAsia X, and we've also had Sharul Azra Ibrahim, from the CEO of 1MDB. So of course, the next dialogue session we're expecting to get more sponsors and to have a more successful event in the future. So before we end, I would like to invite the Imperial College Alumni Committee member just to come to the front of the screen with Dr. Ambiga and the rest of our VIPs for a photo session. And next is our press conference. Once again, thank you very, very much. And see you at the foyer for the networking session. Thank you.